Greetings. All right, here we are. It is today. Well, it's Friday, the October the 11th, and Columbus Day weekend, and this is the 20th, I believe. Yeah, episode 27 of the Mbuku Chronicles. Well, I hope you're all doing well. And the main theme of this episode is going to be democracy. Somebody, one of you subscribers a long time ago, asked me to comment on what is democracy. And it brought to mind this book here that I got back in 85, 84, somewhere around there. And it is in this collected works of Walt Whitman, there's an essay, a really incredible essay called Democratic Vistas. And this is a seminal, in my view, essay in the annals of American literature, and you can purchase it as a separate book, and I do encourage you to do that. So I want to the reason why I bring this particular essay up by Walt Whitman, which he published, I believe, 1874, was that he made a comment that the problem of democracy is tied up with two words: nature and freedom. Now, in terms of nature is a democracy. When we look at all the particular creatures, birds, bees, flowers, trees, elephants, whatever. When you look at and study those and observe them, which I did as a boy growing up in Kenya back in I was born in 47, so that would be, I suppose it was really when I started to make these observations, I was 8 years old. So this was, 1955. And I lived on the ranch when I wasn't in prison at school, from 1955 until I left to go to school in England in 47, 50, 60, 61, around there. Yeah, 61. So for 6 years, during my vacations from being from being away from, at home on the ranch. I lived on a ranch that my father had bought, 50,000 acres, and we had everything there, except an elephant. So I spent a lot of my boyhood, when I was at the ranch, just taking my gun and my dog, his name was Tusker, and we would just walk out into the bush and just observe. I mean, I didn't do much shooting of any kind. I mean, the gun was just there. And, because you're in the wild after all, and you never know what's going to happen. But my observations were at that time that everything in nature is totally, consummately democratic. Every creature, every phenomenon, the trees, the bushes, the birds, the butterflies, the snakes, whatever, they all perform and do their particular role, which has been allotted to them by the divine guidance of the world, because nature is an expression of divine wisdom. And it's just pretty clear that that's what is the case. So, but the they're not free. All these animals, the insects, the birds, and the lions and the hyenas and the giraffes and whatever, they perform their allotted roles out of instincts. I mean, they can't form concepts or ideas, so they simply carry out their allotted role that they play in the great, wonderful democracy that is nature. But the point is they're not free. Now, as far as human beings go, we can form concepts and ideas out of our own resources. That is, we have freedom. I mean, I'm not going to go into whether people are free. Everybody is free, whether they choose to act out of their own freedom or not is another total other subject, which I'm not going to get into. But the point is that we will create a democracy, the human being, at the time when we freely, out of our own initiative and choice, free choice, take up our allotted roles in our society according to our particular talents and destinies and karma. But we do that freely out of our own free will. So if we do that, so that everybody understands from their position in life that this is the role they choose to play in this particular lifetime in order to make the entire social organism function as a healthy social organism. So I've talked about the threefold Commonwealth as the what should I call it? The impulse to be brought about in the future. Now the point about Walt Whitman is he said the history of democracy has yet to be written because democracy has yet to be enacted. And that is true today, as it was when he published that essay in 1874. Democracy has not existed on the face of the earth, except maybe in small enclaves here and there. So, for instance, we have an event that takes place every year since, it started in 1982. We just had the 72nd one. It's called the Pacific Macrobiotic Conference, and that is a democracy. Now, the key thing about democracy is there's no voting. There's no votes, and are simply not done. What we do is the people that are participating in the conference put up on on a blackboard the issues, the topics, the subjects that they want to discuss during the course of the next day's proceedings. And then the group as a whole, whoever happens to be there, who make up the conference, they decide by total consensus which ones they want to discuss and how much time to allot to them, and so forth. And then once the topics have been chosen and the sequence of the issues, subjects, whatever, are given an allotted time, the person who brings up the issue is the one, when the discussions begin, initiates the conversation. So it's all done by total consensus. If one person doesn't want to do it, we don't do it. It has to be done in total agreement. Now that's a democracy there. As I mentioned, at one point I mentioned that the bankers, the head of the American Banking Association, sometime around the time of the Depression, said that we have set up the political party system in order to serve as a distraction for the American people, so they don't know what we're up to, the bankers. Now, so I'm going to just read a couple of quotes here from Walt Whitman from his book, from his essay, and the first one I wrote down here. I suggest, therefore, the possibility should some really original American poets, remember, we're living in the United States of America, we're not living in America. America is an ideal yet to be realized, my opinion. Original American poets, perhaps artists or teachers, arise, mounting the horizon like planets, stars of the first magnitude, that from their eminence, fusing contributions, races, far localities, etc. together, they would give more compaction and more moral identity, the quality today most needed. You can say that is spades about this moment I am speaking. To these states, then all the Constitution, legislature, and judicial ties, and all its hitherto political, warlike, or materialistic experience. Now there's a quote to really chew on right there. And then the other one, I think if I can locate it in the pages that I marked here. I say we had best look our times and lands searchingly in the face, like a physician diagnosing some deep disease. Never was there perhaps more hollowness at heart than at present, and here in the United States. You can repeat that in space for this day, these times. Genuine belief seems to have left us. The underlying principles of the states are not honestly believed in. For all this hectic glow and these melodramatic screamings, nor is humanity itself believed in. What penetrating eye does not everywhere see through the mask? The spectacle is appalling. We live in an atmosphere of hypocrisy throughout. The men believe not in the women, nor the women in the men. A scornful superciliousness rules in literature. The aim of all the literature is to find something to make fun of. A lot of church, sex, etc., the most dismal phantasms I know usurp the name of religion. Conversation is a mass of badinage. From deceit in the spirit, the mother of all false deeds, the offspring is already incalculable. An acute and candid person in the Revenue Department in Washington, who is led by the course of his employment to regularly visit the cities north, south, and west to investigate frauds, has talked much with me about his discoveries. The depravity of the business class of our country is not less than has been supposed, but infinitely greater. The official services of America, national, state, and municipal, in all their branches and departments, except the judiciary, are saturated in corruption, bribery, falsehood, and maladministration, and the judiciary itself is tainted. The great cities reek with respectable as much as non-respectable robbery and scoundrelism. In fashionable life, flippancy, tepid armor, weak infidelism, small aims or no aims at all, only to kill time. In business, this all-devouring modern word, business, the one sole object is by any means pecuniary gain. The magician's serpent in the fable are up all the other serpents, and money making is our magician's serpent. remaining today sole master of the field. I mean, this is so prophetic. Of the field. So, and then, you know, just to underline that, I just read a couple of days ago that the top 1% over the last 10 years, since the last great financial crisis, which was what, 2008, over that period of time, the top 1% have increased their net worth, the top 1%, by 300 trillion. And the rest of us have lost 900 billion. I mean, what can you say? I mean, that just underlines what Whitman said well, what is it? 1874, 100 and what? 50 years ago, or whatever it is. So that's democracy. Okay? It's an ideal yet to be realized. And the instrument for realizing it, so to speak, is the threefold Commonwealth, you know, which I'm going to go into detail down the road. And of course, it's in my next book, which is, you know, I'm not going to give a publishing date. You know, whenever I give myself deadlines, I always miss them. So forget any deadlines. All right, now, so that's that. Now I still want to make sure that I have in the episode this quote that I usually put in, but I'm going to make a variation of that quote, which is from the prologue to the Lord of the Rings movie. You know, if you ever seen that movie, if you haven't, please, it's a good movie. Actually, it's a great movie. It's not as good as the book, but then movies are generally not as good as the books from which they are drawn. But anyway, so Lady Galadriel is doing the voiceover. Cate Blanchett, who's the actress who plays the role of Lady Galadriel, she does the voiceover to the prologue at the beginning of the first movie of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And she says, while we're watching the scenes, she does this voiceover where she says, and Sauron gave rings of power, of which 3 he gave to the elves, 7 he gave to the dwarves, and 11 he gave to men. But he deceived them all, for in secret he forged the one ring, and into this ring, and here's the real important part of the whole quote, he poured all his malice, hatred, and will to dominate. So the thing is, this leads me into the subject matter which some of you have been wanting me to talk about for some time now, which is secret brotherhoods. Now, the secret, we have to realize where we are in the context of the time we live in. This is 2019 AD, and we're living in the 5th post-Atlantean culture, which began approximately around 1413 AD, and it's going to last 2,160 years. And so that was the 15th century. Now, there were many individual men and women who were spiritually advanced, that they knew that this was happening. And they were located in various mystery centers, which are in Europe and I think in America also, and the Far East. And some of them decided that they were going to use the knowledge that they had, the spiritual knowledge about what the impulses were that were coming in to the world as a result of the beginning of the Anglo-Germanic culture, to use their knowledge for their own selfish purposes. Now, as a result, these secret brotherhoods arose. Now, I don't have any real solid knowledge of when they actually began to form, but the first clue is when the first central bank was formed. Okay, so the first central bank was the Swedish Riksbank, and it was founded in 1668. And then the Bank of England, at the request of the British government, was founded in 1694. So my surmising, what you might call educated or informed guess, is that the secret brotherhoods began their operations in the 16th century. That's what I think. 1550, somewhere around there. It doesn't really matter, because that's not what's really important. The important thing is to know what they are, what their intentions are. Now, initially there were two of them. Now, how this came about is that we have to talk about Sarat. Now, Sarat is also known as the sun demon, the Antichrist, and his number is 666. So what 666 refers to is the year that Sarat began to make his approach toward humanity. And then twice 666, which is whatever it is, 1660, 666, what's that? Like 6, 12, 13, like 1332, something like that, is when he began to really come closer and closer into the midst of humanity. And then 3 times 666 is 1998, when he came into humanity, right into our domain, so to speak. And he announced his arrival very clearly, because if you remember, in 1998, we had a comet come by called Hale-Bopp. The comet was the outer materialistic manifestation of the arrival of Sarat into the midst of humanity, and he is here. Now, Sarat also in 1939, he took possession of Hitler. So that whole phenomena of the Nazis and the Hitler saying, "I'm here to complete what Christ didn't accomplish." I mean, he's quoted as saying that. All that was done by the secret brotherhoods who were behind Hitler, Goebbels and all those guys. And so that's one manifestation. Now, Sarat has brought into his, shall we say, under his control, 2 angels who are retarded. These are angels that are retarded angels from the Egyptian culture. Okay, so in terms of cultures, the first post-Atlantean culture, after the Atlantean flood and the Atlantean continent sank beneath the ocean and is now covered by the Atlantic Ocean itself. The Atlantean continent signaled that, so after that happened, we have the first post-Atlantean culture, which is the ancient Indian, which is ahistorical. In other words, there's no historical documents of that time. And each of these cultures, as I say, last 2,160 years. And so then after that we had the Persian, then we had the Egyptian, Chaldean, Hebrew, Babylonian culture, then the Greco-Roman, and then now the Anglo-Germanic. And then this is going to be followed by the Slavic, and then the final one is either called the American or the Scandinavian. Now, so the brother Seurat brought under his, shall we say, submission, these two retarded angels, and one of which is a Luciferic Ahrimanic qualities, and the other one is purely Ahrimanic. Now, so there were originally two factions in the secret brotherhoods who were warring against each other. In other words, each one of them, which comes out of the Freemasons, the Freemason lodges, and the other one comes out of the Jesuit lodges, they wanted to have total control. And the 30 Years' War, which, I can't remember exactly when that took place. I think it was around 14th century, I think. No, it must have been later than that. Let me look that up. Let me get my thing here. I gotta find out when the 30 Years' War took place. Hang on a minute. All right. Yeah, 30 Years' War. Let me find out here. The trusty Wikipedia. It's good for a lot of things. Okay. 30 Years' War. (1613) and 1648. See, that really falls in with the time of the founding of the first central bank, which was, what did I say, 1668. So 20 years after the 30 Years' War. Essentially, the 30 Years' War was fought between the Freemason lodges of the secret brotherhoods and the Jesuit lodges. And it caused a tremendous amount of disruption, had consequences which were really dreadful for the whole of European civilization at that time. And anyway, but when the war ended, it was because they decided to start to work together. They said, okay, we'll just, this is not helping anybody. Neither one of us is winning anything. So let's get together and work together. And the Freemasons, they were under the, how should we say, using their black magic powers, their black magic arts. They got in contact with the retarded angel that was more Ahrimanic, and got, shall we say, instruction from this retarded angel under the influence of Seurat. And the Freemasons decided that their domain that they were going to, be in control of was the banking system. And so they formed the first central bank, which was the first of many, and we have all these central banks pretty much every country, major country. I mean, there's one in England, of course we have the Bank of England, now we have the Federal Reserve, we have the Bank of International Settlements, anyway, which is, the sort of central bank of all the central banks, and there are a bunch of them. And the purpose of controlling the banking system, and remember my quote from the American Banking Association head back in the 30s, saying we have created a political party system in order to distract the American people from what we're doing. And so what they did, is through their banking thing, and they took control of governments. So essentially, as Rudolf Steiner said, governments today are nothing but henchmen for the bankers. And that's pretty obvious. So now the Jesuits, on the other hand, their domain of influence was going to be the cultural sphere, which includes education, art, and the spiritual life. They were going to control that. So through their influences in the Roman Catholic Church, they're trying to control the spiritual life of humanity, and you have the public education, which was brought about by one of their, was initiated by one of their members. What was his name? Amos Comenius. And so the government would then control education and control the curriculum of education to suit the government's particular needs. And of course, they succeeded in doing that worldwide, pretty much. And as far as art, art, to say anything about art today, because everything we do is actually artistic to some degree, even computer programming is an art, building a building, whatever, architecture, painting, music. They want to control that, but and of course spiritual life. So they want to impose upon us what kind of spiritual life that we have, which is a sin against the spirit, which is one of the sins that, according to the Bible, that cannot be forgiven. Now, okay, so what they've done is through black magic, other techniques, they succeeded in finding out how to control the masses. And so the mass media is under their control, the brotherhoods. Now, it doesn't really matter who these people are or even where they're located. It's really much more important to know what they're up to. And I've delineated you somewhat, not in real depth, which may be something that I'll get to as I learn more about them through reading and studying Steiner. The main book where I first came across the existence of these secret brotherhoods was in Steiner's lecture series called The Karma of Untruthfulness. So there's 2 volumes. I highly recommend you get those and start reading them and understanding what he says in there. Now, the whole thing I want to bring up about this democracy question, or should we say the mystery of democracy, is that there will be, in this threefold commonwealth, there will no political parties. It simply will not exist. We won't have a central government such as we have today. Everything will devolve to the local politics and local government, and local politics and local government will be conducted in such a manner that it will be, in charge of whether it's a municipality or a district or a county, whatever, of the logistical framework in which people live in those particular areas. So the roads and the street lights and the police department, the fire department, all that stuff, and it's done by consensus. The people who are who are the ones in positions of authority in in the local municipalities and counties and districts and cities and whatever, are the ones who make the decisions, but they do it in consultancy with the local population, and of course with the technology that we have today, it's very easy to conduct meetings over the internet, using Skype or whatever, and saying, okay, we got to do this, we got to make this decision. What are we going to do? Have a discussion, have a debate, and then make a decision. Now, as I said, this decision has to be done by consensus, because the fact of the matter is, everybody knows what to do. They know what is the right thing to do. Everybody does, subconsciously. What is the right thing to do in any particular set of circumstances? So if there's no consensus, that means whomever the party or parties are that object, and they have to have an argument of why they object to, we have to be able to step into their shoes and see where they're coming from, because everybody is right from their own particular point of view. And if you combine that with the fact that everybody knows what the right thing to do when we're, having to make a decision about a particular, something that the municipality or the county or the district or the province wants to do, everybody knows what the right thing is to do. In whatever the question, whatever the issue is. So, and now Steiner mentions this, which is why I'm bringing it up. He says a dead weight prevents people from doing this. Now, what is the source of this dead weight? Now, this brings me to the I think it's lecture 19 in the Karma of Untruthfulness. I think that's actually in volume 2. The dead weight, now from the spiritual point of view, the perspective that Steiner brings to this, he says this dead weight arises for the following reason. When we walk around in our day-to-day lives, we walk to work, or we're going for a walk in the park, or we're out hiking, or we're just taking a walk around the block, whatever, when we're outdoors and we're looking at all the trees and the flowers, the shrubs, the birds, and hearing the birds singing and all that, if we don't recognize consciously that in the trees, the bushes, the flowers, and the shrubs, the lawns and so forth, there are elemental beings present. They're what they're called nature spirits, the elemental beings of the mineral kingdom, known as gnomes, of the water kingdom, known as undines, of the air kingdom, sylphs, and of the fiery kingdom, salamanders. If we don't consciously recognize and acknowledge the presence of these elemental beings, what happens is that Ahriman comes up from underneath us and implants in us through one of his minions, who is known as Mammon. Now, Mammon is more widely known as the god of money, but he also brings into humanity microorganisms, toxic microorganisms. And these, in the case of us not acknowledging the presence of these elemental beings that are everywhere, if we don't, we're completely ignorant of their existence, then these microorganisms from below come into our intestinal tract. That's the spiritual activity that's going on. But there's also a physical activity going on which compounds the problem. And this, of course, is the topic of my book, The End of Medicine. If you haven't got it yet, please get it and read it, and more importantly, implement the suggestions that I put in there. Now, there's external reason, because external is what we do in terms of our maintaining our ability to function in the physical world. Those are externalities, and among them are our dietary intake. Now, if we eat, as I go into great detail in the End of Medicine, a meat and potato diet, quote unquote, then over the course of time what happens is the development of chronic intestinal stagnation. And when chronic intestinal stagnation occurs, our intestines become distorted. Now, when you read the lecture 19 in the Karma of Untruthfulness, there is a description of what happens to our ganglions, the nerve tissue that's in the intestinal tract. Because I used to do a lot of macrobiotic counseling way back in the, from like 82 to 93. I saw maybe over 4,000 people in that time. And without exception, everybody had chronic intestinal stagnation. Now, one of my clients had been doing colonics, and when she called me to make the appointment for her consultation, I said, bring me a booklet from the colonic place that you've been going to get your colonics, because of course I actively disrecommend colonics. So anyway, she came, and during the course of the consultation, I looked at the booklet, a little pamphlet like this thing, and they had all these barium photographs of the condition, or shall we say, the architecture of the people's intestines who are going into this place to have colonics. And it was like, wow. I mean, there's some serious distortions going on in those people's intestines. And, it's rampant. It's like, there's not one person that you can look at today, whether you're watching TV, walking down the street, in the restaurant, on the bus, opening a magazine, everybody, without exception, has chronic intestinal stagnation. Now, the point is that this dead weight is not only consisting of those noxious bacteria and microorganisms or viruses or whatnot that are in the intestines as a result of the spiritual activity of mammon. They're also in there because the modern dietary intake initiates this process of chronic intestinal stagnation, which distorts the architecture of the intestines. Now, spiritually, Lucifer and Ahriman, the two opposing powers to the spiritual development of humanity, they are tethered to the ganglion, in spiritually speaking, in our intestines. So, and they're supposed to be, shall we say, shackled. They're kept in a, how shall we say, they're kept spiritually, or shall we say, as an imagination, they're kept in prison there. If our intestines are healthy and the architecture of our intestines are as they should be. Now, when they become distorted as a result of our modern dietary intake, those ganglions become distorted. And so, as a result, Lucifer and Ahriman are let loose upon the world. I mean, Steiner's description of evil is nothing but it is that which is contained within the human being let loose upon the world. So then, it's hardly surprising that we have all these evil machinations going on pretty much everywhere in the world today. It's just not surprising at all. And so I encourage you, get the book, read it. Now it's a difficult book. It may be even intimidating to you. One of my readers told me this, that she found it intimidating. Well, it is a difficult book. There's no question about it. I mean, it's very condensed and it's very deep. So it bears repeated reading so you understand it. But the most important thing is to implement it. You know, start the macrobiotic diet, and which is in the book, it's in my website, and so forth and so on. And it's on my YouTube channel, as well as stuff about it. How to do the ginger compress, how to cook your own meal, menus, recipes, whatever. Take cooking classes. There's bound to be somebody in your neck of the woods that does cooking classes. All right then, so now, I did get a notification today from one of you that you wanted me to talk about the Azuras. But I think what we will do is I'm just going to leave it open as to what I'm going to do the next episode. The subject matter. We'll see, because things are coming up pretty fast right now, where the fact that the world monetary system is imploding right now will begin to really make itself felt to everybody, probably in November. So I'm going to just keep things open as to what I'm going to discuss next time, the 28th episode. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is a personal matter. I have a son. His name is Ulrich. He's my youngest son. He's about 35. Yeah, he was born in 85. So that makes him, 30? He'll be 35 next birthday, I guess. Let's see, March 85. That's 15 years plus 19, that's 34 years. So next birthday he'll be 35. Now he's a film director. He does video production and broadcasting. And he's trying to raise money to do his first feature film, which is called The Alternate. And he asked me if I would put a plug-in for my subscribers to put a few shekels, like, if there's 315 of you right now, and thank you very much for subscribing. And if you all put in just $10 each, that's still over $3,000, which would be a great help to him. The GoFundMe ends, I think, at the end of the month. So you have plenty of time. What I'll do is I'll put the link on my YouTube comment area. I'll put the link there, and so if you go there and you can just check it out and put in $10, $50, whatever you can, your generosity or your financial condition allows right now. Anyway, so as I said, I will leave open the subject matter. Azuras, I really don't know too much about. I haven't read a lot about them. All I know about them, what I have been able to glean, is they're the third opposing power after Lucifer and Ahriman. And of course I have already mentioned that Ahriman is incarnating right now. The Azuras started making their presence felt toward the end of the last century. And as far as I can tell, their main impulse, their main activity is to attack our higher ego and try to destroy it so that we become completely, subhuman. Our higher ego gets attacked. That may be a very superficial, it probably is a superficial rendition. That's the only thing I've come across so far, and it's not that deep yet. So if I do, over the course of time, I have a lot of, I probably have about 150, 160 volumes of Steiner, and a lot of those I haven't read at all. A lot of them, of course, I've read many times, but as I said, I haven't really come across anything other than what I've just said about the Asuras. Anyway, so humanity is under attack. That's a fact. And the main source of this attack is the secret brotherhoods. And they have their minions everywhere, including government and banks and military and so forth. So that's it for this episode. I'll probably put it up over the course of the weekend, and it's very cold here, 21 degrees. I'm wearing my Star Trek robe that was given to me by my son Ulrich, big Star Trek. The Alternate is a science fiction movie that he scripted and he's directing it, and he's very good at what he does. I'm not saying that just because he's my son. He is. He's really good. I'm not saying that just because he's my son. He is very excellent at what he does. So on that note, thank you very much. I hope you're all having a great time in these days of trial and tribulation, as well as magic and wonder. Thank you very much.